Welcome to the Strategic Plan, an audio series exploring 3 areas that are helping to shape bright, grounded, connected, and inspired students well beyond their years at Leo Baeck. We will dig into the topics of social, emotional well-being, and differentiated learning to see what these buzzwords are all about. And we will visit how teaching Jewish identity has adapted to meet changing times. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the show. And now back to my conversation with Sheryl Faith. Let's move on to assessing how it is successful or not. We just talked about how you can qualify it. Is there a way that you can quantify this success that differentiated learning has?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly both qualitative and quantitative ways to assess.
So let's talk about both. I mean, we touched on qualitative a little bit in the last thing, but let's talk about both.
Well, I mean, I think, I'm going to just speak generally because both are used when we assess. We assess both quantitatively and qualitatively. I think in the earlier stages of learning, qualitative assessment is far more informative. But basically, as an educator, I would know that I was successfully differentiating the learning for my students if, number one, my students can speak articulately about their learning process. So they have deep metacognition. They know themselves. So they know their needs as unique learners. So I would measure this by providing consistent opportunities for reflection and moments when the students can share their overall progress and goals during one-on-one conversations and during events like the 3-way conferences. That's a time where you might be able to see the students in action, knowing themselves. So that's extremely important. We've learned a lot about metacognition and its impact on student achievement.
And that three-way conference is between the student, the teacher, and
parent. Yes. Okay. And so that's an opportunity. That's more of a kind of a larger event. Mm-hmm. But this should be happening on a weekly and daily basis, that students are reflecting, well, I did this well. I'm not so sure this is an area of strength for me. Some teachers, and these are teachers who do that really well, they are doing it every single lesson that they teach. Those students are asked to be metacognitive. What you find are students who just know exactly what the next step is in their learning, and they're able to self-advocate. These are skills that will extend well beyond their time within school. To be able to know your needs and self-advocate, I think it's incredible. Yeah. So that's one thing. And again, that's something that has to be measured qualitatively. Number 2, I would see an improvement in the quality of work. Obviously, that's what we're aiming for as well. But also, very importantly, in the engagement and motivation of my students. So we want these kids to be lifelong learners, right? And so we're trying to have them enjoy this learning process, be engaged and motivated by what they're doing. And so I would expect that they would be knowledgeable enough, confident enough, and engaged enough to achieve a higher standard. So I'd be seeing actual improvement in the kind of their quantitative results and also qualitatively in the way that they interact with the learning within the classroom.
Yeah, I guess another qualitative one would just be classroom environment, like their ability to focus, their interaction with their other students and the teacher. Are there other ways that you can assess these things? Like, what are some more examples of ways you can assess the learning?
Well, you know what I can do is I'll tell you there's 3 forms of assessment that actually allow us to know our students very deeply, right? Good. And all this has to do with knowing our students really in the end, is knowing how well we're doing our job and also knowing our students. Mm-hmm. And so there's 3, we call it assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. So basically all I'm saying is diagnostic assessment, formative, so that happens throughout, and then summative at the end. We, in traditional teaching, we were used to just being assessed summatively, right? We all had a test at the end of the unit. We had a quiz at the end of a lesson. That was them summatively assessing. But we have learned, and it sounds obvious now, that actually summative assessment gives us very little. It's too late at the end of a unit. to have all this information about what they know. Can you imagine if a student actually didn't learn anything you found out at the very end?
Yeah, it's like too late.
It's too late. It's too late. So we actually greatly value, even more so than summative assessment, diagnostic and formative, because it means that we can actually guide and alter our teaching depending on how the students are doing. And then the summative assessment really is meant to tell us how successful were we at supporting our students and how much has that student grown, right? And so that's really what the summative kind of allows us to know. So you don't know anything about your student unless you are constantly and consistently checking in, and not just at the end. And research tells us that teachers who effectively assess students diagnostically, formatively, and summatively, they foster students who know themselves better, just the metacognition bit, and also achieve higher standard.
So what's the interaction between the administration, staff, and the teachers in this regard? Is there like a lot of, I don't want to say like paperwork or like files on kids and stuff, but like how does it actually work? What's like the nitty gritty of that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it is equally as important for us to see this entire community as being invested in a child's success, right? So not just the student and teacher, but also administration, also parents. And so like regularly, here's one example of us, like we have something called SIMS, which throughout the year, at multiple points throughout the year, during a staff meeting or, a PD day or something like that, we check in. So we bring together teaching teams and they share amongst each other or, with an admin present, what is happening within their students, which students have highest needs, what students need to be challenged, which students need some alteration in the learning environment. So that means that not just the home-based teacher, but the specialists and the administration really understand the needs of the students within their classroom. So we're not just, living in classroom silos. We're communicating with one another about the needs of those students. And then administration, we meet regularly to talk about, ways that we can kind of, better support the teachers in their efforts to know their students as well. And so we try to leverage the times that we have together, those collaborative, moments, and we have many because it's something we value, to be able to effectively understand our learners.
And the students achieve because of all of this, I would like at great levels, right? Yes.
Well, I mean, they benefit from it because it means that, knowledge is passed along, right? It's not sitting with one teacher that knows this child best. It means that other people can benefit from that understanding. And therefore that student will be able to achieve not just in the classes that their home-based teacher teaches, but also the specialists and also the ways in which the admin interact with that student.
Right. It's really interesting. And it's like, I like the approach is, it's like you said, there was like a minute where you said like, oh, it's so clear that like the way that it was before just wasn't going to work. And now because of the approach that Leo Baeck is taking, I think that it's working, right? That's what you're telling me.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I think it's hard because a lot of people will say, and it's been said to me before, I'm a product of that traditional teaching, and look at me, I'm successful. I, did this in life or that in life. And I say that's wonderful because that means that the teaching, you were one of the people that the teaching reached. Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah.
Right. It was great that worked really, really well for you and your learning style. So that's a wonderful outcome for that person. But, what I would say is, in truth, there are many casualties, unfortunately, of that teaching style where, the students struggled and hated the learning process. right? I know many people who complained about that, many people who still hold the scars of math and struggling and feeling like the quote unquote dumbest kid in the class or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I think it was because they were being forced to fit into kind of an Iron Maiden-like system that just wasn't built for such unique styles of learning. And now we're learning to celebrate that. Yeah. Now we're learning to say, oh, it's okay. It's okay that you learn that way, because, we can leverage that. We can make that a really big positive. So I think we're in a really bright moment in education right now.
It's a great spot to end off on. Sheryl, thank you so much. I really appreciate you explaining all this to me. It's very, very interesting, and I really appreciate the work you're doing at Leo Baeck. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Strategic Plan audio series. I encourage you to keep learning about what creates true educational excellence and how a strong Jewish independent school is flourishing right here in Toronto. For more information, visit leobeck.ca, go to the About drop-down menu, and find all you need to know on the Strategic Plan webpage.